Public Works Committee for April 17th. Counselor Wilkerson?
Here.
Counselor Gear?
Here.
Counselor Sims?
Here.
Counselor Nelms?
Here.
And Counselor Harden?
Here.
All present, you got a quorum.
All right, can I have a motion to dispense the reading and approval of the minutes from April 3rd?
Second.
Motion by Counselor Sims, second by Counselor Nelms, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? 5-0, Melody. Old business 260323, request for permission to sign an indemnification agreement for work performed in the right-of-way at 610 Broadway. From Mr. Cale Smith, and then are you the property owner?
I'm Matt Smith, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So I guess just a quick recap. This was in committee a couple weeks ago, went to council last week on the consent agenda, and then was taken off the consent agenda and moved back to committee for further discussion. I guess the goal there was that there might be a couple things that we didn't consider in terms of how this could be potentially handled for this property and for other properties. Is that correct?
Yes, in general.
Okay.
I do think we need to sort of talk about, not with this item, but what we want to do about right-of-way, planting trees, and whether the city's going to do that, or under what circumstances we'll allow homeowners to do it.
And what kind of trees it will have.
Right, what kind of trees, when it's okay, when it's not, all those sorts of things. So I think that that's something we will discuss separately.
Sure.
But with regard to this item, one of the reasons I sent it back was because there were some concerns about needing some more input on it. And one of the things that we could talk about that we did not talk about last time, which would also lead into if we're going to let residents do this, is to have a covenant done that would run with the land. So currently, when you plant trees, you sign an indemnity agreement, but what ends up happening inevitably is that people who plant the trees move, and then the new people own the house and they don't care about the trees, and then the trees become the city's problem. If there is a way to make that agreement run with the land by having homeowners enter into a covenant, which would make whoever owns the land at that point in time responsible for the trees. Because I know that was a concern last time. My personal belief is if we're going to allow residents to plant trees in the right way, that's the direction we should go. If we're not, and we're just going to say either no one can plant trees in the right way or only the city can plant trees in the right way, that's a difference. Then you don't have to worry about the covenants, obviously. But with regard to this one, I know that was a concern of some people, was what happens later on. And we did not discuss that option. So that is an option that the city can undertake, should that make a difference to anyone on this item. And then, like I said, I think we'll have a separate item where we will discuss how we move forward with who's allowed to plant trees in the right way and under what circumstances.
Do you mind if I speak to it just for a second?
Yeah, in just a second, I think. Sure.
You want signing in, sir?
And I think part of the reason too was last committee we almost had only this committee. And
There was
not
nobody
the
else
council.
here
Almost
that I
everybody
saw
else had
that,
gone, so.
get some input from others. Everybody left us. I just want that to be noted on the record. But
Yeah, we did.
But,
What do you want to note on the record?
no,
Agreed.
I'm sorry.
And I was just going to say, it's a question of, I know the trees they were going to put in there.
Have already put in there.
Land, but
Do what?
Have already placed in the right of way.
Oh.
These
yeah,
are
I guess
already
they
in the
did.
right
You're
of way.
right, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Those are, what kind of oaks are they? Willow oaks, which could go 40 to 50 feet in the air, and more importantly, what they do to our sidewalks. And we end up having to repair sidewalks, because truthfully, the root system goes beyond our right of way. And so I think Berkeley, obviously rightly so, was concerned about future repairs, you know, as these trees grow and 10, 15, 20 years from now, we got sidewalk problems. And so then the question became, you know, what do we want to do? I mean, there's a lot of these that are in the right of way right now. There are a lot of folks have done it over the years. What's our decision?
Or those trees may have been there before sidewalks were put in. Who knows?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So I was going to ask President Wyatt if there was a way to create a covenant, how does that cover not just the tree itself, but the sidewalks, for example, that have been of concern in the past,
Well,
and sidewalk
so
repair, and that
essentially
sort of
what
thing?
the covenant would do would make the tree, the tree would be the homeowner's tree, even though the land wouldn't be. And so whatever happens with the tree, or anything that needs to happen with the tree, becomes the homeowner's responsibility. So if it's,
Including sidewalk repair, if
yes, it's causing
totally
damage of
broken.
some kind.
What we have typically, we have a duty to maintain whatever improvement it is. What Alex is talking about, 10 years from now, somebody moves away, sells their house, and the new owner says, I didn't know anything about this. The way to get around that is if we have to include in our covenant, in our indemnification agreement, a legal description, record that in probate court, and that runs with the property, whoever owns it is responsible for that. And they've been given notice under the recording in the probate court that they have this responsibility and can't say, it's not my problem, I don't know anything about it. It puts everyone on notice that there's a continuing obligation associated with that improvement. In this case, a tree planting would be the improvement.
Okay.
So President Wyatt, in this case, since that's not the existing policy, would the homeowner have to proffer a covenant, or would that be part of the
No, it's a
motion?
condition of what we.
Yeah, we can make it a condition of
Okay.
We have on occasion
Yep.
had covenants running with the land and it's spelled out specifically.
Okay.
So, no, it's not something that, it's a condition of them being able to plant in our right, that we control our right.
It would in essence be just like the indemnity agreement, it's just
Okay.
more extensive.
And then I reached out to Cale this afternoon with some questions and just wondered if, and he said that, you know, there had been some additional discussion, so I was just wondering if we could maybe get a report from him next.
Yeah, sure. And so Melanie knows this too, because she had some questions for me that I forwarded to the arborist, Michael. So it's probably gonna be best if I just read these. Questions came from Melanie. In your opinion, are willow oaks a good choice as a tree type to allow between sidewalks and the road? He says willow oaks are good choices for street trees due to their ability to withstand tough conditions. They have small leaves and acorns that provide minimal fall litter compared to other shade trees. While there are other tree types that are specifically for narrow areas that do not provide the same street tree character that currently exists along Broadway and surrounding streets. And they typically have lower branches. So the lower branches of the willow oak canopy will get high enough to not provide any obstruction to pedestrian or vehicles. That's question number one. Number two, there was an LSU Ag Center recommendation that Melanie sent and asked for the arborist to review it about spacing and apart from structures. And he said all shade trees can be planted in a wide range of spacing distances. Most websites will list the recommended spacing for the tree to achieve maximum canopy width. However, shade trees are very versatile and will adapt to their conditions. If an obstruction is in place, the tree canopy will typically not grow as aggressively in that direction. And then the third question, she asked, do you foresee any long-term problems planting willow oaks close to the sidewalk or structures, or what other problems do you foresee? And he says, while it is impossible to state that there will be any long-term problems, I believe the situation is unlikely to have any major issues. As previously mentioned in the original review, the adjacent sidewalk appears to have been in place for a long time, therefore the subgrade should be fairly compact. Tree roots, especially for newly planted tree, are going to move towards the path of least resistance and shouldn't create any cracking in the sidewalk. As far as the canopy of the tree is concerned, the only part that may need to be pruned more often than normal is toward the homeowner's side of the tree. Is that reflective of what?
Yes, and, I'd like to follow up with that. After our meeting a couple of weeks ago, I just, did some research. I'm a gardener and have a little expertise, and so I'm interested in this, and I found that, basic best practices for these kind of trees are that they be not planted any closer than 20 feet to a structure. I mean, this is ideal condition, right? Not closer than 20 feet to any structure, and when you're going to plant trees in a line like that, it's recommended that they be close to 40 feet apart, and that's because they're going to get, in ideal conditions, 80 to 100 feet tall, and, I don't know how wide. I don't really remember how wide. I think I gave Brian some information about that. But, I think the bottom line here is, so this is when go back to that first, the one where the willow oaks are all in a row, and the picture, number one picture that I sent you. No, the one that shows them as street trees, not the one from the ag center, that one. So that is what trees, those are willow oaks, and those are conditions, in my opinion, where you would want to use a tree that large when you had a large Broadway, and probably not on the small lots that we have in Homewood. I think we all want to encourage trees, and I think our question is simply, I feel like we did have a policy in place for this sort of thing. The policy was homeowners come to us when they want to plant something in the right of way, and we make a determination at that point if it's something that we want to allow there. And I feel like if we had gone through that process, that it's a good chance that we might have allowed trees in the right of way. But we most probably would have suggested something smaller than a willow oak. That's considered the largest of the trees. And so, that's how this has happened, right? And we want to support trees, and I think we have to decide, do we want trees in our right of way moving forward? But when you walk up and down the street in this area, 75 and 80 years ago, when these trees were planted in this right of way area between the sidewalk and the road, most of those are not there anymore. Most trees that are being planted now are crepe myrtles and smaller varieties. There are still a good many of them up in the yards, but the ones around the corner, the pictures that I took, there aren't that many left on Broadway that are in our city right of way. Most of them are further up. This is around the corner, and this has about the same depth from the sidewalk to the road as our condition on 610 Broadway. And so these are the trees, and this is about what we'll be seeing. Of course, it won't be for another 75 years. And I think the question is just, do we want to encourage this? Do we want to have this? And if not, then what solution might we find with this particular homeowner? Would he consider a different type tree? Would the city consider taking his willow oaks and planting them in a better place? I don't know. And then the question about going forward, do we really want anything planted there? So I think that's where we are.
Yeah,
Sure.
sure, Mr. Gwaltney, and then Mr. Smith, sure. Okay, sure, go for it.
I'll just step up here and say, first of all, I'm Matt Smith. My wife was here last time. She is much better at this than me because she is a self-described tree hugger. She loves trees. We planted 37 trees at our last house because she loves them. I promise we're not doing that here. But she is in Dallas for work, so I got the duty of coming up here and speaking to y'all. So because I think you're making valid points, obviously. I just kind of want to address how we got to this point because I think it will give y'all some clarity on it a little bit too. Part of me feels like there's two issues here, and we kind of might be getting caught in the middle because I think there's a valid point of what do you want to do with the homeowners? Is this a right move to make going forward for trees in the right of way? Is that something we want to address But it's almost like we're kind of the in-between, like, okay, we're going to hammer down with this crowd for whatever reason, and that's the beginning of the new policy. And my thought, covenant, I'm a former attorney, I like the covenant idea. I wouldn't have a problem signing whatever y'all came up with on that, because we planted the trees and I feel responsible for that. But as far as how we got to this point, trust me, we did not try to circumvent the system to get here. We actually, my wife and I, went up and down Dixon and Broadway, not to ask people, hey, what's your tree? How did you plant this? But more to introduce ourselves, say hello, and in the conversation, not everybody we met, but some, my wife loves trees, so she talked to him about, hey, what type is that? How did y'all go about planting them? Did you have to get a request? Everyone we spoke to, up and down Broadway, said we planted them, and that was it. You know, we came from a place where there was a board. HOA, thank you. An HOA. And so we knew Homewood doesn't have an HOA, so we're like, what do we do? And they're like, we just planted them. No big deal. And so my wife then talked to a landscaper and said, hey, we're looking at doing trees. What do you think would make sense to do in this area with this depth, with this length? They both had some suggestions because my wife has plenty, and he listened and he made some recommendations. They both agreed on the willow oaks and put them in. And when the landscaper's still there doing some work at the house, Scott Evans, Scott Cook, not Evans, Scott Cook, came by, and my wife saw him taking some photos and went out and talked to him, and then I was driving up at the same time. Super nice guy, first of all. Very nice guy. That's somebody y'all want as a face of Homewood, because he's very, very nice. But he said, you know, hey, y'all are supposed to get permission for this before you do it. You know, here, he said, now he did say, I'll tell you, y'all did us a favor because you took down a dead tree. There was a dead tree in that right of way. It's supposedly the city is responsible for taking that down. We just paid to take it down. We didn't know, so we took it down and replaced it with 4 new trees. He said, call Kel. He gave me Kel's number, and I think probably within 5 minutes I was leaving Kel a message, because we try to do stuff the right way, and we wanted to make sure we were doing this the right way. Kel gave me the information on what the next steps were, which was coming before the committee to do all that. Again, our landscaper is still there when Scott's there, and this is probably not Scott's place. It's probably not his job to say, hey, you need to move those trees and go plant them somewhere else. He didn't make that suggestion, so we didn't think anything of it. We talked about coming in and applying for an indemnification agreement. And then the next step was the arborist came, which my understanding, I guess, tax dollars, whatever, go to pay for this arborist for the city. He comes out. I was not there. My wife was, and walked out and talked to him. And you were asking great questions last time. My wife said she was too nervous to stand up and answer them, but the arborist addressed your exact questions about the spacing. He measured them with the measuring tape. Got out there and measured them and said, this is good. I think he actually said, you know, these might be a little bit closer than what would normal, but I don't see any reason that these would cause any issues with tree growth, tree development. He said they've got good deep roots, so they're not surface roots that would cause issues normally with sidewalks and roads. The tree leaves and things you mentioned, he also mentioned to my wife about it's good for drainage. You don't have to worry about that. And again, our landscaper is still there doing work, so if he would have said, and he said, my recommendation to the council is going to be that these trees be approved. He said, I see no problem with them. If he would have said right then and there, hey, these are not good trees, my landscaper's there. I probably could have got him to move those without having to pay him again. I hesitate to say this because y'all will laugh as we probably spent too much on it, but we spent $7,000 doing those trees and pulling up weeds and crabgrass in that right of way. I thought our builder ran out of money. Maybe he realized he couldn't do it. I don't know. But we resodded that whole area with zoysia grass. It matches our yard. We spent that money. We didn't come to the city for it. We spent the money on the trees. We spent the money to have the irrigation system in the yard changed in our yard, not on the right of way, so it will reach the trees and the grass out there. If the arborist would have said, my recommendation is not to approve these, here's a suggestion, our landscaper's right there. We could have done something. if I go back to him now, he's gonna, and rightfully so, he's gonna charge us to do that. It's not, hey, sorry, it's freebie, you do it. I also understand we're coming after the fact. That's on us. We tried to ask the question. I will say after the fact, I went back to a few of those people, and one of the neighbors said, we never did that. And his wife kind of grabbed him and said, hey, remember we had to reply to take the dead tree down, and when we did, I think we signed the indemnification agreement for the new trees. And he felt terrible about it because they had given us advice that we didn't need it. We were not trying to circumvent y'all. I'd love to do the covenant or the indemnification. We plan on being in Homewood for a long time. We go to Trinity. Our kids are at Edgewood and TCDC, and I also understand at some point we'll die or sell that house, and something needs to happen with those trees. So anyway, I talk a lot, I blabber a lot, so I appreciate y'all letting me talk for just a second, but I did want to give y'all a little clarity on that.
Can I ask?
Sure.
Mr. Councilman, I'm noticing now, because now I figured out which house this is and where this is.
Yes.
So that's,
Right on
it's
Dixon.
not, yeah, so it's on the Dixon side, it's not on the Broadway side.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right,
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 that's
right,
the
right.
Dixon side.
Okay.
Address is
Yeah.
Broadway.
It's on the side street, okay.
And it is a little bit wider there than
There.
some of the right-of-ways.
Yeah.
But it is, in fairness, it's still narrow. It's
It is wider, and that area is wider, but Oglesby was also that same distance. And, not every willow oak does tear up the sidewalk. It doesn't. But I think, like I said, I'm not sure, given the question straight up, when you were planting, I feel like we would have tried to encourage a smaller tree. I've sat here for 2 years and listened to our public services talk about the expense of maintaining the trees and
Yeah, the gutters and the
sidewalks
drainage.
and the.
Sure.
So I feel like it's kind of, there's a lot to consider, but thank you for your time and explaining that.
Yeah, I appreciate you speaking. Yes, Councilor Jones. Actually, Councilor Smith wanted to say something first.
No, I asked him the question, that was my question, about the,
Okay.
being on Dixon side.
Oh, that's right. Councilor
Mr.
Walton
Wall.
was waiting first.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah,
then
you were
Councilor
next.
Jones.
You
Go
were
ahead.
next.
Okay. I was gonna say, I like the idea of the covenant. I'm not in favor of punishing a homeowner anytime they take the initiative to add to our canopy, because one of the hardest things we have to do in this city is find places on city property that we can plant trees. The last time we budgeted for trees, 2 years ago? I think we put 50 in. We were just scrambling and scrounging for spots to put trees. We ended up putting some of the school. So I appreciate it when you take the initiative to plant these trees in the right of way. I understand the situation, whether you're new here or you just got here, you didn't know. Honestly, I probably wouldn't have known that I had to do it whenever we renovated our house. I actually came before council while I was on council and got permission. I've never planted the trees, but the way it works out, I think we should be encouraging this instead of punishing people for it in this situation, especially when we've had a professional give their professional opinion to tell us that this is acceptable. So I think whenever opinions come into play, you have to leverage those that have the expertise in this area. Additionally, to your comment about the sidewalks, let's be realistic. With the amount of traffic on our sidewalks and just the people that use these things, the kids that drive on them, if we're not replacing a sidewalk once every 50 to 75 years, we should consider ourselves lucky. So I just like to live in the real world. So more than likely, by the time these push up a sidewalk or have any adverse impact on it, that sidewalk's going to need to be adjusted anyway or replaced. So I'm not the committee.
Sure.
Me,
Yeah.
I'm like,
Councilor Jones?
I would like to see the council so I can give my opinion there.
Yeah, I would second that sentiment. That we can certainly do the covenant, but we've already had the arborist answer all the questions and say this is what they would recommend. But most homeowners have no idea how far the city right of way goes up, and so I think this is fine. We probably need a policy moving forward, but there's no problem with this, in my opinion. I think we should grant it with the covenant, whatever we come up with.
Well, the one comment to dovetail on that about the trees, I get it, it may not be, it's after the fact, but I would not want to further punish someone by having to go to the expense to remove those trees. I think that's unreasonable.
Well, just for the record, look, as interested about what we do going forward. And, you know, tree policies are extensive, and you have to have someone to, you know, enforce them, you know, in terms of where to plant. I mean, they're important, and I wasn't talking about punishing the homeowner. That wasn't what I wanted to do. I just, like I said, I've heard from different departments in our city, and I think it's important to plan for long-term, you know, infrastructure health, and that's the discussion I want to have. So, thank you.
Yeah, and, I mean, kind of in follow-up to what you're saying, Melanie, I do appreciate kind of like the questions, because it led us to a deeper conversation about the covenant potential, because I think that's important for going forward, because as Councilor Gwaltney just said, I mean, we need to figure out where we can put, you know, substantial trees which will, you know, reestablish and maintain our canopy in the right of way, and have a way where the city's not on the hook all the time. So the covenant is a great tool for us to work with homeowners to maintain that canopy. So I'm grateful for the conversation, because we need more than just crepe myrtles in the right of way to really maintain that canopy. We're going to need, you know, these type trees, and so I appreciate the discussion for sure. And you were going to say something, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to speak to the fact that I think the covenant wasn't something that was kind of suggested or brought up at the last committee meeting, and it is kind of the halfway meeting point, I feel like, between taking the ownership and maintenance off of the city and the city's resources.
Alex, can we move forward with making a motion to include the covenant at this point?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. So I don't know, is that a motion?
Yes.
Okay. So that's a motion to approve the identification agreement with the covenant?
Yes, which will include making repairs, tree maintenance, responsibility of the trees. Okay. And that will go with the home?
Yeah, it'll
Okay.
run with the land.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion by Councilor Nelms, second by Councilor Sims. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
We still have 5.
It should be 5-0.
Okay.
Somebody provide a legal description for Carol.
Yeah, you want me to get that?
It's gonna be on your title policy.
So next step, just so you know, would be that this goes out to full council next Monday evening at 6. So we'll be in the room right next door.
Thank you.
All
Good
right,
job.
and with that, we stand adjourned.